The latest race in Spa has shown that Ricciardo's return to F1 has taken a massive hit, and therefore his aspirations to retire with Red Bull and sign a contract as a full-time driver with the Austrian squad have gone south really quick. What the media didn't want to portray is that Yuki Tsunoda, Ricciardo's teammate, has also been portrayed as the best replacement for Perez prior to the entire De Vries-Ricciardo drama. And now the Japanese driver has proved everyone wrong by scoring points yet again in Spa. So, is this the end of Ricciardo's fairy tale return in F1, and will we see Tsunoda actually take over his seat? If there is one thing that has kept the entire F1 world entertained, it's the return of Daniel Ricciardo in AlphaTauri. Although he's officially on a loan from Red Bull, it's safe to say that the entire world knows the true meaning behind him driving for the worst team on the grid to put a challenge on Tsunoda and Perez and show that he can be the perfect candidate for the second seat at Red Bull. And after the first race in Budapest, we were more or less convinced that Ricciardo's mission is not that far-fetched, and we could see him on the grid alongside Verstappen sooner rather than later. He was able to outperform his teammate Tsunoda in qualifying in their first race together, and finished 4 places above him at P13. While you think that the result itself is nothing impressive because he didn't bring points home, it's worth noting that this was the first outing of Ricciardo in the AT04, and he survived a crash in turn 1 which left him running in the last places on the grid. All of this started the entire Ricciardo hype train to the point of Ted Kravitz already labelling him as the team leader and putting Tsunoda in the dark. And if you can handpick an environment in which the young driver could thrive, this would be the perfect storm for him. Now, when talking about the drivers' lineup in AlphaTauri after Budapest, Kravitz didn't save words to put Ricciardo and Tsunoda in their respective positions, as he went on to add, "Poor Yuki, he's battled gamely with this car all year and now is being shown which way to go by Daniel Ricciardo, 17 seconds behind Ricciardo, but that's a bit ouchy for poor Yuki. So Ricciardo is clearly the team leader. He's clearly the team leader now. I'm sorry Yuki, but he is. You can understand that, he's a 7 or 8 time Grand Prix winner." Well, I guess Ted Kravitz is mincing his words right now after the Spa GP, but we'll get to that later in this video. What I want to talk about first is how Ricciardo has slammed AlphaTauri's lack of performance in their second race together. To put things into perspective, he was very close to entering Q2 and potentially even Q3 during the wet qualifying session on Friday, but going wide into Raidillon, he saw his lap time being deleted due to exceeding track limits, which initially meant that he would have a lot of ground to cover on Sunday. The sprint race went a bit better for him as he hanged around the points for quite some time before getting swallowed by the pack behind, but the true test was the race. After being out-qualified by his teammate Tsunoda, Ricciardo had a very tough mission on his hands, one that seemed to showcase his ability to do recovery races much better than anybody else on the track, but this time he failed the mission. There were only 2 drivers who finished below Ricciardo, one of which was the rookie Sargent and Hülkenberg, and to put the cherry on the cake, his teammate Tsunoda was able to finish 10th and bring home the 3rd championship point for AlphaTauri. It's worth noting that the sole reason Ricciardo was brought to the team was to increase the value of the Italian squad and to make sure that there would be increased cash flow from investors, as he is this positive figure who can bring a lot of joy and interest in a team. But this can be done if the car he's driving is giving him such trouble, and while we didn't want to admit it at first, it seems like the AT04 is not the perfect fit for Ricciardo's driving style. Spa is a race that is characterised by low downforce requirements, which means that most of the race involves long straights, and that's a killer parameter for the Italian squad. What this means is that Ricciardo and Tsunoda are forced to brake earlier due to the instability of the car under braking and give up corner entrance speed, sacrificing lap time for the sake of keeping the car on the track. This is something that Tsunoda was able to execute perfectly well, unlike his teammate Ricciardo, as the Japanese driver finished 24 seconds ahead of the Aussie and showed yet again that he's also a candidate for that Red Bull seat that Ricciardo desperately wants to lobby for. When talking about this matter, Yuki had a harsh response to his teammate, and the sole AlphaTauri points winner in 2023 went on to elaborate, "It'll be clear soon, but either driver will be slower and the slower guy won't make it to Red Bull. That's easy, the faster guy has more chance to go to Red Bull. It's how it works in Formula 1, that's it." it's a challenge anyways. In the end, it doesn't make much difference, Daniel or Nick, whatever. Anyway, I have to do the same thing I was doing to Nick. You need to beat your teammate, that's the most important thing. Daniel is not an easy driver to beat, but at the same time, I'll do what I did in the last couple of races, and it's clear the faster guy will stay or go up. That's it. Well, I highly doubt that Ricciardo took the Yuki challenge seriously, because in the past 2 seasons, the Japanese driver was frequently outperformed by Gasly, and it was the Frenchman who brought home the points for the Italian squad. That's why many have anticipated that it would be Nick de Vries, the one-race wonder, who would take over the reins at AlphaTauri. And with him being replaced by Ricciardo, it was obvious that Yuki was portrayed as the underdog in the entire situation. Be that as it may, it does seem like this entire situation is slowly but surely coming to a breaking point, and Yuki doesn't plan to let off the gas pedal anytime soon. After all, Ricciardo has delivered terrible news for his fans, adding that his car has suffered from a lack of pace much more than he could have originally anticipated. And if this manner continues after the summer break, then I guess we can shut down the rumour mill that Ricciardo would be the perfect replacement for Perez and actually focus on what would make the most sense for the Austrian squad. Build a super team with another young and potential driver like Yuki. When talking about the Spa performance, Ricciardo went on to say, "I felt quite, let's say, limited today in terms of pace. I think even in clear air I was struggling a lot. Honestly, just getting the front end all through the middle sector, all the high speed sections, I was just washing out. In clear air we didn't break away from the back, we couldn't, and then it felt like they were able to get more out of their tyres early. I was normally getting overtaken while we all had fresh tyres, and then when it settled, I'd have better pace but was stuck behind them. Obviously, that's not good for the tyres as well." Ricciardo definitely didn't show what cloth he's made out of in Spa. And while we can add to this to the fact that the AT04 is not the best car on the grid, but quite the contrary, the worst one, it's also safe to assume that Tsunoda's P10 finish is something that's kept everyone on their toes. Ted Kravitz, as I mentioned earlier in this video, was quick to deny his words about Ricciardo leading the team after Budapest, saying that the young superstar should never be underestimated again, adding that he was even close to Stroll on P9 and he had no business running around in the points on this legendary circuit with the kind of car he was driving. Ricciardo's mission remains the same: bring back AlphaTauri where they belong in the midfield and raise the value of the team if they decide to sell to the highest bidder. If you manage to do so, then you'll be rewarded with a seat at Red Bull. However, what seems to be the biggest issue for Ricciardo now is the fact that his teammate has decided to take over the reins in the team and push them at least to P7 or P8 in the Constructors' Championship. And more likely than not, this would grant Tsunoda a place in Red Bull if the Austrian squad decides that enough is enough with Perez.